So we recently had someone slide into our DMs here at Melbourne Strength Culture regarding a general warm-up and a prescription of a general warm-up that they could use for a majority of their strength sessions. So today I thought it would be a really good opportunity for us to describe and look into how we prescribe a lot of our warm-ups here, particularly those who are more at the beginner or early intermediate stage. And for us, that is a movement prep series and a progression of movements that they can build context upon and then transfer from the warm-up area into the actual gym itself. So I just want to preface this video by saying there's two general views on a warm-up. You can do a very general warm-up, which is what I'm going to describe today. And then you can do a very specific warm-up that is very tailored towards your individual needs for your actual barbell and heavy strength or powerlifting training. We push a more specific warm-up for the more advanced lifters that we have here at Melbourne Strength Culture, and that is because they have a better understanding of the general needs of movement preparation for the actual specific lifts. So for myself, my squat warm-up is some breathing drills, some glute activation, and then purely just under the barbell doing some squats, some light squats to prepare me for squatting. Whereas for our more beginner trainers and beginner athletes, we do a movement prep series that they can then transfer from the warm-up area into the weights room. So for that, we're going to go to the whiteboard and I'm going to show you what our general warm-up structure at Melbourne Strength Culture looks like. So it's no secret, here at Melbourne Strength Culture, we promote breathing exercises as vitally important for every single person that walks into a gym. Our base understanding of breathing comes from the Postural Restoration Institute that we have taken and then implemented into our training here at Melbourne Strength Culture and our programming. So breathing is the first piece of our warm-up puzzle, regardless of whether it's a specific or a general warm-up. And that is because breathing allows us to, one, center our pelvis and our lumbopelvic region into a much more stable position and into a more neutral position for lifting. The second reason we like to use breathing is that it creates amazing amounts of context for each individual that they can then understand what a neutral spine and a neutral pelvic position is, that they can then transfer into the big heavy bilateral lifts, mainly the squats and deadlifts. So breathing for us is number one. I've done multiple videos of the 90-90 hip lift here on Melbourne Strength Culture's YouTube channel, I'll link them in the description box below. But just so you know, we use mainly three 90-90 hip lift variations. Number one is obviously the 90-90 hip lift. Number two would be the 90-90 hip shift, depending on how they present through their assessment here at Melbourne Strength Culture. And then number three will be a 90-90 hip lift with internal rotation bias. These three variations of the 90-90 hip lift are our first step into our warm-up before moving into some more movement preparation type things. So our first step after our breathing exercises or drills that we use here at Melbourne Strength Culture is the actual hip flexor stretch. And I will preface this by saying that not every single person needs to do hip flexor mobilizations. However, a lot of sedentary athletes, as silly as that sounds, a lot of sedentary athletes actually need some sort of hip opening sequence in order to engage their glutes better and also set a better core position. So it's our first step for that reason. It allows us to set a better position throughout the rest of our warm-up and hence create a better position in our actual lifting as well. The main movements that we use here for our hip flexor stretching, there's three key ones. We have a hip flexor stretch, a half kneeling hip flexor stretch. We have half kneeling hip flexor mobs, and then we also have a rectus femoris or couch stretch. So the third step in our warm-up sequence here at Melbourne Strength Culture is core activation. And the reason we have this so early on in our piece of the warm-up is because it sets the preface for the rest of the warm-up and the actual lifting itself. And that is we need to set a proper core position, a neutral spine. This all starts through our 90-90 hip lift progressions or sequences, whatever you want to call them. And it transfers through our hip flexor mobilizations into the next step, which is obviously core activation. By activating the core, we set some context for each individual. The neutral spine is what we're actually looking for, particularly when we start to load with barbells. The most common exercises that we prescribe here for our core activation are dead bugs and the dead bug progressions and regressions, and also plank progressions and regressions, whether they be moving or regressed versions of a standard plank, depending on the individual's competency level. Step 4 in our general warm-up here at Melbourne Strength Culture for our beginner and intermediate lifters is glute activation. The reason glute activation is so important is because it allows us to set and fire our glutes as our primary hip extensors. Unfortunately, because of our general being now as a human where we're in an excessive anterior tilt without the ability to pull yourself back into a neutral pelvis, the glutes are in a position where they're not really able to function at their best level, which can limit our performance in the gym. So by throwing some glute activation into your warm-up, you might actually be able to fire your glutes a little better and find them, and as a result be able to strengthen them so that they become more dominant through a lot of the lower body lifts, and they also become more dominant in holding and maintaining your lumbopelvic position through upper body lifts. So glute activation is a must. The most common exercises that we prescribe here for glute activation are glute bridges with or without mini bands, again depending on how the person presents it through their assessment. We have single leg bridge progressions and regressions to add in some sort of anti-rotation activation as well through the core. And then we also have standing progressions and regressions with mini band series, monster walks, lateral walks, all those sort of things. Step 5 for our general warm-up series here at Melbourne Strength Culture is reaching. We have talked about the benefits of reaching here on the channel through a few videos. Again, I'll link them in the description box below. However, reaching for the most part is not really accessed during normal day-to-day life anymore. We don't really climb off trees or pull ourselves up on trees, so our shoulder blade never really moves through a full journey of upward rotation, protraction, and all that sort of stuff. Particularly now that we get told to stand tall with our shoulders back and a big chest as what's seen as a good standing posture. So as a result of that, sometimes a few of our muscles, particularly the serratus anterior and the lower trap, become weak and they're not very well activated for a lot of people. So we incorporate reaching through our movement prep series for our general warm-up. The most common exercises that we prescribe here for our reaching progressions are back to wall shoulder flexions, forearm wall slides, foam roller wall slides, and full protraction push-ups. So step 7 on our general warm-up here at Melbourne Strength Culture is retraction. I will preface this small part of the video by saying that we sometimes, or a majority of the time, throw our retraction as an A2 supplementary to our A1 lift or our big lift of the day. And that is because the retraction muscles or the entire upper back musculature, we find it is better to activate in between warm-up sets of their bigger lifts, namely squats and bench press, as opposed to doing the retraction at the start and then build upon that and build context with the warm-up, the rest of the warm-up. So we normally throw this as an A2. However, retraction is very important, and the most common exercises that we program for our retraction in our warm-ups would be a half kneeling face pull or a supine band pull apart. Step 8 of our general warm-up movement series here at Melbourne Strength Culture is locomotion. And this is simply just so that the individual can piece together the ideas that we've built throughout our general warm-up. And now they can move in some sort of actual motion that can then be applied onto the actual gym floor and into the barbell training. For this here, we prescribe certain movement series such as the pullback butt kick variations, walking Spider-Mans, stiff-legged deadlifts, single-leg deadlifts, inchworms, and lunge variations and progressions and regressions. So there you have it, our general warm-up series that we use here at Melbourne Strength Culture to build context for our individual athletes, particularly those who are beginner and intermediate stage. Our general warm-up here allows them to build context so they can have a better understanding of the movements and positions that are required for heavy lifting, all whilst getting some activation through the core, the glutes, opening up the hips, and getting full reaching and retraction and protraction of the scapula. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below. As always, thank you for watching. I hope we managed to help you out with this little video here. Happy lifting, welcome to the culture, and happy to have you on board.